Disclaimer: this content is intended for mature audiences only. Viewer discretion is advised. I never thought I would ever be in a situation like this. It sounds unreal, almost like something pulled straight out of a movie, but it happened to me in real life. That night, the quiet of the house, the way the lights flickered low in the living room, and the closeness that shouldn't have been there, it all created a moment I wasn't prepared for. I was with my stepdad, a man who had been part of my life for years, someone who wasn't supposed to be anything more than family. But the lines of trust, comfort, and temptation blurred in ways I still struggle to explain. At first, it didn't feel dangerous. He was older, steady, and carried a presence that made me feel safe. But safety is a tricky thing. It can so easily turn into something else. The way he looked at me wasn't the way a stepfather should look at his stepdaughter. And the way I found myself drawn in, that was where the trouble began. Sometimes, the people who make us feel most comfortable are the same ones who can pull us into situations that test our limits. It started with casual conversations, long talks in the kitchen when everyone else had gone to bed. He had a way of listening that made me feel seen, like my words actually mattered. Then it became gentle touches, a hand on my shoulder that lingered a little too long, a hug that felt different than it should have. I didn't push him away, and maybe that's where I let the door open to something I wasn't ready for. But just as quickly as the moment built, it shattered. Because right when the air between us got heavy, when the silence seemed louder than words, I heard it. A voice calling my name. My daughter's voice. She was in the other room, and she had no idea what was happening on the other side of the wall. My heart stopped. The guilt, the fear, the rush of reality, it hit all at once. What would she think if she saw me like this? What would I even tell her? That's where the story begins. A situation that seemed private, quiet, and hidden suddenly cracked wide open with just one call of my name. I don't think I've ever felt so many emotions in a single heartbeat: shame, confusion, and an overwhelming sense of being caught between two worlds. One was the world I should have protected, the world where I was a mother first. The other was the world I should never have crossed into, where temptation whispered louder than reason. The sound of my daughter's voice still lingered in the air, and for a moment, everything between us froze. My stepdad quickly leaned back, creating space, as if nothing unusual had happened. But inside me, something had already shifted. I tried to steady my breathing, hoping my daughter wouldn't notice the nervous tremor in my voice when I called back to her. She didn't suspect a thing. At least not then. But I did. And that's what haunted me the most. To explain how I even got here, I need to take you back. My stepdad wasn't someone I grew up with from childhood. He came into my life much later, when my mom remarried after years of being on her own. By the time he entered the picture, I was already an adult with my own responsibilities, raising my daughter, trying to keep our little family together. He wasn't supposed to play a major role in my life. He was supposed to just be Mom's husband. But life has a way of twisting the roles we assign to people. From the start, he had this way of treating me like I wasn't just an afterthought. He asked about my day, about my dreams, about things no one else seemed to notice. He wasn't flashy, not the kind of man who demanded attention when he walked into a room. Instead, he carried this quiet confidence, something steady that made you want to lean in closer. And the more time we spent together, the more I noticed it. The way his eyes held onto mine longer than they should have. The way conversations with him felt easier than they should. I would catch myself comparing him to the men I had known before, men who left me feeling unappreciated or misunderstood. He was different. Older, wiser, calmer. There was a comfort in that difference that I couldn't ignore, no matter how wrong it felt to even think about. He filled spaces in conversations where others left silence. He made ordinary evenings feel like they mattered. That was where the danger really started, not in something physical, but in the emotions that built in the quiet spaces between us. My daughter, of course, had no idea. To her, he was just Grandpa, the man who sometimes helped her with schoolwork or told silly stories at the dinner table. She saw him as safe and dependable, and that's exactly what made me feel so conflicted. Because behind that image, I knew there was something unspoken growing between us, a kind of energy that neither of us dared to name out loud. There were little moments that played over and over in my mind. Like the time we were washing dishes side by side and his hand brushed against mine, not once, but twice, and he didn't pull away right away. Or the time he stayed up late with me in the living room, talking about things I'd never admitted to anyone else, and when the conversation slowed, the silence between us felt heavier than the words that came before. I tried to convince myself that I was imagining it, that I was only reading too much into simple gestures, that my mind was creating stories where none existed. But then there were those looks, subtle, lingering, filled with something I didn't dare define. And I knew it wasn't just in my head. So when my daughter called out my name that night, it was more than just an interruption. It was like the universe reminding me of the line I wasn't supposed to cross. But even after that moment, even with the guilt tightening in my chest, I couldn't erase what had already started between us. It was there, unspoken but undeniable. I keep wondering, have you ever felt drawn to someone you knew you shouldn't be? That strange pull, like gravity, even when you know the consequences could change everything. If you have, you know how complicated it feels. That's exactly where I found myself, with emotions I couldn't control, and a secret that could shatter the people I cared about most. The night didn't end there, though. In fact, that moment only deepened the silence between us, a silence full of things left unsaid. And as much as I tried to push it down, I couldn't shake the question, what would happen the next time we were alone? The next morning, everything looked the same on the surface, but nothing felt the same inside me. I was sitting at the kitchen table with my coffee when he walked in. My stepdad greeted me the way he always did, calm, steady, with that familiar warmth in his voice. To anyone else, it would have seemed normal. But to me, it was different now. I couldn't stop replaying the way things almost crossed the line the night before, and the sound of my daughter's voice interrupting us was still ringing in my ears. He didn't say anything about what happened, and neither did I. But our silence wasn't the kind of silence you share with just anyone. It was heavy, full of something unspoken. Every glance felt like a conversation we were both afraid to have. I wanted to ask him if he felt it too, if that closeness between us wasn't just in my head. But the words never came out. Instead, I stirred my coffee and acted like everything was fine, even though inside me it was anything but fine. Later that day, while my daughter was busy with her homework, he offered to help me with a few things around the house. It was the simplest excuse to spend more time together, but I didn't turn it down. We ended up in the living room, moving furniture, dusting, and sharing small talk that seemed too ordinary for the tension hanging in the air. At one point, he reached out to lift a heavy box, and his hand brushed against mine again. Just like before, he didn't pull away immediately. That spark, subtle but undeniable, was there again. That's when I realized the main conflict wasn't just about us. It was about the world outside of us too. My daughter. My mom. The family we were supposed to protect, not risk. Every time he looked at me a second too long, I felt torn between two lives. The one where I was a responsible mother and daughter, and the one where I gave in to something I shouldn't. There were moments when I convinced myself to cut it off completely, to avoid him, to make sure nothing could ever happen again. But then there were moments when I didn't want to, when I secretly craved that closeness, because it filled something in me that had been missing for a long time. The conflict grew inside me like a storm, love, guilt, longing, fear, all colliding in ways that left me breathless. Meanwhile, another layer to the story was unfolding. My daughter, even though she was young, wasn't blind. She began noticing the way he and I spent time together. She asked small, innocent questions. Why does Grandpa always help you more than Grandma? Or, why are you two always talking in the kitchen? She said it casually, without suspicion, but it made my heart pound. What if she started to notice more? What if she saw something we couldn't explain away? Even my mom, in her quiet way, seemed to sense a shift. She wasn't suspicious, but she mentioned once that I seemed happier lately. The irony of her words cut deep. Happier? Maybe, but for all the wrong reasons. This is where the conflict grew heavier. It wasn't just about my feelings anymore, it was about the secret web forming around all of us. Every choice I made, every word I didn't say, felt like it was pushing me closer to a moment where everything would be exposed. I want to pause here and ask you, if you were in my shoes, what would you do? Would you pull away before things went too far, or would you take the risk and follow the connection, no matter the cost? The tension had been building for days, quietly threading itself through every interaction we had. I thought maybe the feelings would fade if I just ignored them, but instead, they only grew heavier. Every time he walked into the room, I felt my chest tighten. Every time his eyes lingered on mine, even for a second too long, I knew we were on dangerous ground. It wasn't just in my head anymore, it was real, and neither of us could pretend otherwise. One evening, the house was quieter than usual. My mom had gone out to visit a friend, and my daughter had gone to bed earlier than expected. The silence wrapped around us, thick and unavoidable. I was sitting on the couch, pretending to scroll through my phone, when he walked in and sat down across from me. For a while, neither of us said a word. The air between us was heavy with everything we hadn't admitted, and the stillness felt louder than any conversation. Finally, he spoke. His voice was calm, almost careful. "Do you ever think about the way things feel lately?" he asked. I froze. It was the first time either of us had come close to naming what was happening. I didn't know how to answer. My heart raced, and I could feel my palms sweating. I wanted to tell him yes, that I thought about it all the time, but I was terrified of what would happen if I said it out loud. I looked at him, and in his eyes, I saw the same conflict that was eating away at me, longing mixed with guilt, desire tangled with restraint. For a moment, it felt like the world outside of that room didn't exist. There was only him and me, and the silence waiting for someone to break it. Then, out of nowhere, the sound of footsteps upstairs echoed through the house. My daughter stirred in her room, and the floor creaked under her small steps. We both froze, the fragile moment shattering like glass. My heart raced even faster now, because the danger wasn't just about us anymore, it was about being caught. When the footsteps faded and the house went quiet again, the tension didn't disappear. If anything, it became unbearable. Neither of us moved, but everything inside me was screaming that we were standing on the edge of something we couldn't undo. I keep thinking about that exact moment, the silence after her footsteps, the way our eyes met across the room, and the questions that hung in the air. What would happen if the next time we weren't interrupted? What would happen if the line we'd been dancing around finally broke? This is where everything comes to a head. The point where emotions, temptation, and secrets collide. And the question is, when the moment finally arrives, will we step back into safety, or will we step into something that changes everything forever? Just when I thought the silence between us couldn't get any heavier, something unexpected happened that shook me even more. A few days after that night on the couch, my mom made an announcement over dinner. She said she was thinking about taking a short trip out of town to visit her sister for a week. The news landed like a thunderclap. I nodded and smiled, pretending to be supportive, but inside I felt my stomach twist. If she left, it would mean more time alone in the house with him. The very thing I told myself I needed to avoid was suddenly becoming impossible to escape. The thought both scared me and pulled me in at the same time. I could see the way his expression flickered when my mom shared her plans. He didn't say anything out loud, but his eyes shifted toward me for the briefest second, as if we both understood what this could mean. The unspoken question lingered between us. What would happen if temptation had no barrier? That night, I lay awake replaying everything. My daughter was asleep, unaware of the complicated emotions her mom was wrestling with downstairs. I kept thinking about my role as a mother, my responsibility to protect her from anything that could damage her world. But then there was another voice in my head, one that reminded me how long I'd felt unseen, how rare it was to feel the kind of attention and closeness he gave me. That conflict tore at me until I couldn't sleep. The twist came when my daughter, out of nowhere, asked me a question the next morning. She looked at me innocently and said, "Mom, do you like Grandpa more than Grandma does?" I almost dropped the cup I was holding. The question was so simple, so childlike, but it carried a weight I wasn't ready to face. Did she notice something? Was I giving myself away in ways I didn't even realize? I brushed it off with a laugh, telling her she was being silly, but the fear settled deep inside me. If she was already noticing small things, what would happen if more obvious signs slipped through? The stakes had just been raised. It wasn't just about what I felt anymore, it was about how long we could keep others from seeing it too. Over the next few days, every moment felt sharper. My mom's upcoming trip was now hanging over us like a countdown, and every look, every word between us grew more intense. I caught myself avoiding being in the same room as him when my daughter was nearby, worried she might sense the tension I couldn't hide. Yet when we were alone, the distance between us only made the pull stronger. One evening, while helping my daughter with her homework, I saw him watching us from the doorway. His expression was unreadable, but there was something in his eyes that made my heart race. It wasn't jealousy exactly, it was something deeper, like a question he couldn't ask out loud. That moment unsettled me, because it hinted at something I hadn't considered before. Maybe I wasn't the only one struggling with guilt and longing. Maybe he was just as caught as I was. The closer my mom's departure drew, the more unbearable the silence became. It felt like we were standing at the edge of a cliff, knowing the ground beneath us couldn't hold much longer. And just when I thought I could keep controlling the situation, my daughter asked again why he and I were always so close. The second time she said it, she wasn't laughing. She was watching me carefully, waiting for an answer. That was the moment I realized we weren't just hiding from ourselves anymore, we were hiding from everyone else too. And if the truth came out, it wouldn't just change me. It would change all of us. The week my mom finally left for her trip, the air inside the house shifted instantly. The first night felt strange, too quiet, too open, like the walls themselves were listening. My daughter was asleep upstairs, and once again it was just the two of us in the living room. For days, we had danced around the tension, but now there was nothing left to distract us. The silence pressed in until I couldn't ignore it anymore. He was the first to break it. "We can't keep pretending this isn't here," he said softly, his voice low enough to make my heart race. His eyes locked on mine, and for a moment, I couldn't breathe. Everything we had avoided saying was suddenly out in the open. I wanted to tell him he was wrong, that nothing was happening, but the truth was written all over both of us. The climax came fast, like a storm breaking after weeks of heavy clouds. We admitted what we had been holding back, that the feelings were real, that the closeness wasn't just imagined. For a moment, it felt like giving in would be inevitable. The pull between us was undeniable, and the quiet of the house only made it more dangerous. But then, just as the weight of that confession hung between us, we were interrupted again, not by footsteps this time, but by a voice from the doorway. My daughter was standing there, sleepy-eyed, clutching her blanket. She asked the simplest question, but it shattered everything. "Why are you two always whispering when Grandma isn't here?" The look on his face mirrored mine: shock, fear, guilt. In that instant, the spell was broken. Reality came crashing back, harder than before. I rushed to her side, brushing it off with a nervous laugh, telling her we were just talking about family things. She seemed to accept it, but the damage had already been done. I realized how close we had come to crossing a line that couldn't be undone, and how easily she could have seen too much. The unexpected twist came the next morning. My mom called from her trip, casually mentioning that my daughter had been asking her questions before she left. "She told me she thinks you and her step-grandpa have secrets," my mom said, almost joking. My blood ran cold. My daughter had noticed more than I thought, and she had already planted the seed in someone else's mind. That was the moment everything changed. The risk was no longer just about us, it was about protecting my daughter from a truth she didn't need to carry. So I pulled back hard. I set distance between us, forced myself to cut off what had almost happened, even though it tore at me inside. The story didn't end in fire or chaos, but in silence. A silence filled with what we both knew and would never say again. Because sometimes the hardest choice isn't about what you want, it's about what you're willing to sacrifice to keep your world from breaking apart. And yet, even now, I wonder, what if she hadn't walked in that night? Would the ending have been the same, or would everything have changed forever? When my mom returned from her trip, the house went back to its usual rhythm, but I was no longer the same. The tension that had built between my stepdad and me had reached its breaking point, and the near climax of what almost happened lingered in my chest like a secret bruise. We never spoke of it again, not directly. Instead, we carried on with the daily routines, family dinners, casual conversations, and ordinary chores as though nothing had changed. But deep down, everything had. I chose distance, and he respected it. He avoided the long stares, the lingering touches, and the late-night talks that had once drawn us together. We both understood what was at stake now. My daughter's innocent question had been the warning I couldn't ignore, and my mom's casual comment over the phone made it clear others were starting to notice. The risk wasn't worth the destruction it could bring, not to my daughter's world, not to my family's stability. But that didn't mean the feelings disappeared. If anything, they became shadows, always there in the background, but never allowed to step into the light. Sometimes I'd catch myself remembering those moments in the kitchen, those silences that felt louder than words, and I'd wonder what might have happened if things had gone differently. Yet I always circled back to the same truth. Temptation may be powerful, but the cost of giving in would have been far greater. The subplot with my daughter became the real turning point for me. She didn't mention it again, and I took that as my second chance. I became more present with her, more careful with my time and energy, making sure she never had to question where my heart and loyalty stood. She deserved a mother who put her first, above all else. That realization gave me strength to let go of what could have destroyed us. Looking back now, I see the entire experience as a lesson in boundaries, in choices, and in the dangerous power of silence. It showed me how quickly comfort can turn into temptation, and how important it is to recognize the line before it disappears. The romantic suspense of it all may sound intriguing, but the truth is, it was also terrifying. Because in the end, the story wasn't just about me, it was about the people who trusted me the most, and how close I came to breaking that trust. I'll leave you with this question. Do you think I made the right choice by stepping away, or would you have risked everything to follow the connection? Let me know in the comments. I really want to hear your perspective. And if you'd like to see a sequel, exploring what happens when suppressed emotions resurface years later, drop your thoughts below. Summary: this story follows a woman caught between her role as a mother and daughter and an unexpected closeness with her stepdad. As unspoken feelings grow, the risk of discovery by her daughter and family threatens to expose everything. Just when the tension reaches its breaking point, an innocent question changes everything, forcing her to choose between temptation and protecting her family. 6.